This week on Let's Talk About Mental Health, I'm talking about regrets. How regrets can affect your mental health and how to get past them. So, let's get talking. This is Let's Talk About Mental Health, a weekly podcast about mental health and well-being, hosted by Jeremy Godwin. Let's talk about mental health, because the more we talk about it, the easier it gets. Hello and welcome to episode 22 of Let's Talk About Mental Health, the weekly podcast about improving your mental health and well-being. I'm Jeremy Godwin, thank you for joining me. This week's episode is Let's Talk About Regrets. I'll be talking about why we have regrets, how they can impact on our mental health, and how to work through your regrets so that you can get past them for the sake of your well-being. So, let's talk. Regrets. In the words of New Zealand writer Catherine Mansfield, regret is an appalling waste of energy. You can't build on it. It is good only for wallowing in. And that's the thing with regret. It robs you of today and tomorrow because you end up so worried about something that happened yesterday, something which you can never change, no matter how hard you might try. The way that you deal with regrets is a big part of improving your mental health and well-being, because it's inevitable in life that you're going to make mistakes, have setbacks, be on the receiving end of upsetting news, and you'll probably even make a mess of things from time to time. But life isn't about never falling down. Because you will, no matter what you do to avoid it happening. Instead, life is about how you pick yourself up, dust yourself off, learn the lessons that you need to learn, and then keep on keeping on, one day at a time. And that's the focus of this week's episode. Confronting regrets, learning what you need to learn from them, then letting go of them so that they won't hold you back. First, let's define regrets and why we have them. Regret is a feeling that we can have about something that we've done or failed to do in the past. It's sadness, mourning, and disappointment all rolled up into one horrible little package. And if you let regrets take up too much space in your mind, you may find yourself weighed down by them, unable to let them go. If you look the word regret up in the thesaurus, which I did because I'm a writer, and why say things with just one word when you can choose from a list of many, you'll see that regret has some really shitty counterparts. Remorse, sorrow, guilt, repentance, shame, etc., etc. These aren't exactly fun emotions that we're talking about here. Those types of emotions, over the long term, are some soul-destroying, joy-smothering stuff. Regrets are a sign that consciously or subconsciously, you feel that if you had done something differently in the past, then things might have turned out better. For the purposes of today's episode, I'm focusing on things that you feel regret about that are within your own control. In other words, things that you might have said or done, or not said or not done in the past. What I'm not talking about is regret over a lost relationship with a loved one. That's grief, and that's a topic for a future episode. Or thinking about something that another person did or said to you. That's either anger or hurt, again, topics for future episodes. This episode is all about you and dealing with your own regrets. In other words, the things in your direct control. Why do we have regrets? There are two main reasons. First, we feel negatively about the outcome of some situation. And second, we find ourselves playing the what-if game, where either consciously or subconsciously we're asking ourselves, what if? And what I mean by that is that we may be ruminating over what happened or didn't happen and thinking through ways that we could change the outcome by acting or speaking differently. Now that's actually part of our learning process. The ability that we each have to objectively review our past actions and consider what worked so that we can do more of that in the future, and what didn't work so that we can do less of that or come at it from a different angle next time. And that's an essential tool that we all possess, which has contributed not only to you making it to adulthood, because if you didn't learn critical survival lessons as a child, then you would be very unlikely to make it this far. But it's also responsible for our entire species making it to the stage that we're at now. We've come a long way from our ancestors who hadn't even discovered how to create fire, And it's this ability to learn from our actions, which has been fundamental to our individual and collective growth, and remains that way. So in that context, regret can be helpful because it can help us to identify how to behave in the future. However, when you're struggling with mental health issues like depression and anxiety, regret often becomes a weapon that our minds use against us. If you've listened to or read the episode that I did on overthinking, which was all the way back in episode 4, you'll remember that I talked about ruminating and worrying. Worry is about what may or may not happen in the future, whilst ruminating is when you go over and over stuff that happened in the past. Sometimes we can get stuck in this loop of regretting stuff that happened, and it comes back into our minds time and time again. And instead of learning from it, we let it fill us with guilt and shame and remorse every time we experience it. When you're already feeling pretty crappy thanks to a mental illness, it's not like ruminating over the past is doing us any good. Quite the opposite, actually. Often, though, we just can't see past the event, and so we find ourselves returning to it over and over and over. Why? Because we feel guilt or shame or both about whatever it is that happened or didn't happen. And sometimes it's because new information or new perspectives have come to light since then, details which we think might have influenced us to make different choices. Here is the hardest bit to accept about regret and rumination. You can spend the rest of your life obsessing over what happened or didn't happen, what you said or didn't say, but you cannot change it. Unless you have a time machine, which you don't, nothing will ever change. Ever. But if you do have a time machine, call me and we'll go check out ancient Egypt together. Did you make a mistake? Accept it, forgive yourself, and let the guilt go. Did you fail to say or do something and now you think that you should have or could have? Okay, but what useful purpose is that going to serve? None. I don't want to be blunt here, but I can't emphasize this point enough. You cannot change the past. All you can do is learn from it and grow. And going over it until you're blue in the face is not growing, it's stagnating. Making a bad choice in the past doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you human. Having regrets doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you human. And does having regrets make you weak? No. Again, it makes you human. Nobody's perfect. It's what you do with your regrets that counts. Do I have regrets? Yes, absolutely. But I've learned to confront them, process them so that I can learn from them, and then release them. There are a few major things which still pop up for me from time to time, like choosing to end certain friendships or being distant from particular relatives, and during the worst of my depression and anxiety, the guilt and regret was overwhelming at some points. But the reality is, we all make mistakes. If you've never done something that you're not proud of, then you've obviously been living in a cave for your entire life. We human beings are messy creatures. We do stuff based on our values and our beliefs, or the situations that we find ourselves in, and then we spend weeks and months and years beating ourselves up over what did or didn't happen. Don't get me wrong, I think there's a huge difference between malice and innocence when it comes to intention, but the line is not always clear, and you can very easily get into murky territory. We're never going to get it right all of the time, and sometimes we will do things for entirely selfish reasons, or because we don't see the bigger picture, or because we lose control of our emotions, or whatever the case might be. But if you let your regrets control you, then they will control you. A life of regret becomes a life that is filled with sorrow over past actions and fear of future actions, and that's no way to live your life. For me, with time and effort, I was able to reframe the stuff that I had regrets about so that I could then make decisions about my life here in the present and for the future, which would incorporate the lessons of the things that I cannot change from the past. As I've said in earlier episodes, the only true mistake is the one that you don't learn from. And with that in mind, let's talk about how to tackle regrets. So I'm going to talk first about mindset, and then we'll get into how to deal with specific regrets that you might already have. And let me say, as I usually do in these episodes, that the advice that I'm giving you is intended to give you tools that you can use to work on your own self-development and growth. It is not meant to be a substitute for professional therapy. And I'm making this point because if you're dealing with serious, debilitating issues around regret and remorse that are having a damaging effect on your mental health and well-being, then that's where it becomes really important to talk to a professional. It might be necessary to use techniques like cognitive behavioral therapy to process your regrets and help you to manage them for the sake of your health. So with that said, there are of course things that you can do as well, and that's what I'll focus on today. Let's begin, like I said, with your general mindset. You always have the power to choose your mindset. And to quote the Robbie Williams song, No Regrets, which is one of my favorites of his, no regrets, they don't work. And regrets don't work. They only serve to remind you of things that you cannot change and distract you from the present. If you choose to adopt a no regrets mindset in everything that you do, and if you do and say things from a place of kindness, compassion, and understanding, and if you do things that do not hurt others or yourself, then I think you're off to a pretty strong start in the no regrets territory. Often thoughts will pop up without our control, but it's what we do with those thoughts, how we either accept them or reject them, and how we then turn them into feelings that we do have control over. So make the choice every single day to cast aside regret. There's a quote by an unknown author that goes, "You can't have rosy views about the future if your mind is full of the blues about the past. So choose your mindset." Now, with that said, sometimes regrets require a lot more work than simply choosing not to have them. So let's talk about how to tackle specific regrets that you might have. First, identify why you might be having feelings of regret. Dig deep, and I know I say that a lot, and for good reason. You need to understand what is really going on deep within yourself so that you can deal with the root cause of the regret. Is it because your actions or inaction have caused loss? Did they cause grief? Did they cause sorrow? Is it because you think that you would have made different decisions because of what you know now? Understand clearly what it is that's driving your regret. Next, confront reality. The reality is that what has happened, and you cannot change it, no matter how hard you might try or how much time you spend going over and over it. The result is still going to be the result. Quite often we have what's called 20/20 vision in hindsight. In other words, we can see things so much more clearly later on down the track because we have the benefit of having more information or because the true nature of things has become a lot clearer to us. But that doesn't change what happened or didn't happen. Let go of the illusion that you have any control whatsoever over the past, because you don't. Next, forgive yourself for whatever happened or didn't happen. If you can make it right, then make it right. But often you can't, because it's done and long gone. So, all you can do is forgive yourself. You made the decision that you made at the time, and it is what it is. If you made a mistake, accept that you made a mistake, forgive yourself, and let it go. Next, deal with whatever the outcome is. If the thing that you have regret over is recent, then it's very likely that you'll still be dealing with its effects. So deal with it as it is today. In other words, deal with the matter objectively and with a focus on things being what they are, rather than what you wish they were. Learn from what happened, and if you can, take action to rectify the situation or make it right. A note here about apologies. Apologies should always be sincere and heartfelt, and you should be very clear that you understand exactly what you're apologizing for and what you've learned from the situation. But know that the other person is under no obligation to accept your apology, and you need to accept that fact. It is not your words that will deliver the true apology, but your actions, and that will take time. Apologies are often more about us than they are the recipient. Even when they're genuine, there's something that we do to share our remorse, but they can never serve to control what the other person does or doesn't do with our apology. Only time and your actions can right past wrongs. And finally, accept that what has happened in the past is part of your journey. Now, if you thought I was going to get through an episode about regrets without mentioning the French song No Regrets made famous by Edith Piaf, you would be sorely mistaken. And there is a point here about regrets and mistakes being part of your journey. Just bear with me. Rather than focus on the obvious and cliché discussion about the song itself, oh look, she said no regrets, I want to take a moment to look at one of the specific lyrics, and in fact, it's the title. Now, this might be a little bit philosophical and existential, but just go with me for 30 seconds. The original French title of the song is, and pardon my basic French here, but it's Non, je ne regrette rien. And the literal English translation of the title is No, I do not regret anything. Now, there's a point in that title that feels really defiant. It's as though it's almost expected that we must all have regrets and spend so much, if not all of our time, ruminating over what we could change if we could. Piaf may not have written the song, but she is that song. She's fully connected to it. And if you know anything about Edith Piaf's backstory, you'll know that she lived a life of pain and sorrow and extreme poverty in childhood. Yet, she sings defiantly that she would not change a single thing. Why? Because without those experiences, she would not be Edith Piaf. You are where you are today because of everything that led you to this point. So instead of fighting with yourself over what can never be changed, you need to accept that you are where you are and then start from there. And look for the gifts that your past, even the bad stuff in your past, can possibly help to deliver today to make a better future. There's an account on Instagram that I love, which is by Nancy Amavidi, and I'll put the link in the transcript. And in a recent post, she said, and I quote, "If I had the power to go back and change the events, circumstances, people I chose to invest in, I'd change nothing. I am who I am today because of all those events, circumstances, and people I chose to invest in." And that's how I feel about my own experiences with depression and anxiety and every other thing that has happened in my own life. Without any of that, I wouldn't be where I am today. I wouldn't be the person I am today. And in fact, I made a choice a long time ago that I could either let myself be reduced by what had happened to me, or I could learn to draw from it to build something better out of it. When it comes to regrets, what it all boils down to is this. When you choose to look at the things that you have regrets over as being just part of your journey through this life, and you treat them as opportunities to grow and do better both now and in the future, you begin to take back control. And then even the unpleasant stuff becomes part of your story, part of your journey, part of your evolution. You can choose to be weighed down by pain, or you can choose to use it to drive you forward to a better place. The choice is always yours. So that's nearly it for our chat about regrets and mental health. To wrap up this episode, here are a few points to consider. Number 1. Regrets are a result of feelings of guilt and shame over things that you did or said in the past, or didn't do or didn't say. Number 2. The biggest thing that all regrets have in common is that they happened in the past, and you cannot change the past, no matter how hard you might try. As Shakespeare said, what's gone and what's past help should be past grief. And number 3, rather than beating yourself up over something that did or didn't happen, take the time to learn the lesson and put things right so you don't repeat it again, because that is how you grow. Now, as I do every episode, I'm going to close out with a quote that I'd like to encourage you to reflect on and consider what it means for you. And this week's quote is from the great writer Oscar Wilde, and it is, "To regret one's own experiences is to arrest one's own development. To deny one's own experiences is to put a lie into the lips of one's own life. It is no less than a denial of the soul." Let me repeat that. To regret one's own experiences is to arrest one's own development. To deny one's own experiences is to put a lie into the lips of one's own life. It is no less than a denial of the soul. Alright, so to summarize. Regrets will eat away at you if you let them, but they serve no useful purpose other than to show us what to do differently in the future. You cannot change the past, only learn from it. If you made a mistake, learn the lesson you need to learn, put things right, and forgive yourself. Then get on with living your life, one day at a time and with your eyes forward, instead of constantly looking back over your shoulder. Treat yourself with kindness and compassion, and choose to live a life where you reject regrets and instead embrace personal growth. I hope this week's episode gave you some useful and practical advice on the subject of regrets and mental health. Before I close out today, if you're looking to work with someone on improving your overall well-being or addressing specific challenges, then I offer coaching services to clients anywhere in the world via video conference. Take a look at the coaching page on the website at letstalkaboutmentalhealth.com.au/coaching. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform. Also, please tell someone that you know about it, because word of mouth is a great way to help new people find the show. Next week's episode will be resilience. I'll be talking about what resilience is, how it affects your mental health, and how to build your resilience in order to help you deal with setbacks and challenges. I hope you'll join me for that episode, which will be released on Monday morning Australian time, Sunday evening in the UK and Ireland, and Sunday afternoon in the US and Canada. On Friday, I'll be sending out the new issue of the Mental Health Talk newsletter, which is a weekly roundup of articles and resources that are focused on good mental health and well-being. You can find that and all the past episodes of Let's Talk About Mental Health at the website, which is letstalkaboutmentalhealth.com.au. That's letstalkaboutmentalhealth.com.au. You can also sign up at the website to have new posts delivered to your inbox each week. You can also find Let's Talk About Mental Health on social media. I post extra content daily on Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest at LTAMHofficial. That's LTAMHofficial. I also post a daily The Simple Truth series on my other Instagram account, which is Jeremy Godwin Official. That's Jeremy Godwin Official. Have an absolutely fantastic week. Look after yourself, and as always, make a conscious effort to put kindness out into the world, because what you put out comes back to you. Take care and talk to you next time.